Okay, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, could I welcome everybody to the Education Performance Scrutiny panel, and in particular to Councillor Robert Smith, the Cabinet Member, and Helen Morgan-Rees, our Director, and of course to Helen Burgham, the Head of Bishop's Gore, Gareth Rees, the Head of Pontydilys, and Rachel Thomas, the Deputy Head, and of course to everyone else as well. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, there are, Chair. So Councillors Sue Jones and Miles Langstone have tendered apologies, and also the panel should note that Councillor Mike Dirk has actually come off the panel since your last meeting.
Great, thanks, Bridge. Could I add Linda Tyler Lloyd as well? Miles is having his second jab, so he's celebrating, I think, yeah. So he's about at the vaccination centre now. Are there any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Can't see any. Okay, we'll take that as a no. Obviously, a prohibition of party whips, and declaration of party whips. And the next point is the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments that anybody would like to make, or can I have a proposal that they are a true record?
Yeah.
David Halliwell, and seconder. There we are. Linda James, Councillor Linda James. Thank you both very much. Public questions?
There are none.
There are none. Okay, thank you very much. We're going through at a rate of knots. So the real important bit of the meeting, and that was about behaviour strategy and how associated delegated spend to schools is being used. I'm very pleased, as I said earlier, to have the head and deputy from Pontydilys and the head from Bishop Gore. Thank you, and you're really welcome. Would you, I spoke to Rachel a little while ago, just as we came onto the meeting, and they, I know Pontydilys have got a short presentation. Helen, have you got a presentation, or just you have as well? Okay, shall we take those two presentations first, and then what I propose to do is to go through the questions one at a time with the with each school, then answering them, so we don't have to repeat the questions and so on. So great. Well, could Gareth, do you want to kick off with the presentation?
Yeah, that's fine. Helen put her hand up. Did you, Helen, was there something you'd want to say first?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the way that I structured my presentation is actually answering the questions that we were given prior to the meeting as part of the agenda.
That's great, yeah. Excellent. But we'll just go through them at the end, just in case there's anything any of the members want to add. But that's great. That is great. Excellent. Gareth,
likewise, yes, we follow the same strategy as Helen, and Rachel, if that's okay, if you were able to share your screen, and we'll go through the PowerPoint, and then we'll pick up obviously questions thereafter. Thanks.
No problem. If you just bear with me.
Of course. Yes, and the first question was, isn't it, how are you using your delegated spend associated with the behaviour strategy to reduce exclusions and referrals to YOTAS?
Okay, can I just check you can see my screen?
Yes, see that fine, thanks.
Could I ask everybody to turn their mics off unless they're speaking, and that includes me?
Oh, thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. As I explained, I'm Rachel Thomas, an assistant head teacher in Pontydilys Comprehensive School, and I just wanted to give you a brief overview, really, of the context of our school. Our cluster involves Pontydilys, Pentllygell, Llangefeilach, Pontllyw, and Pengelly, and we do have lots of children on preferred placement as well from Carmarthenshire in the local primary school Hendy, but they are our main feeder schools. We've had the biggest number of pupils that we've ever had on roll in Pontydilys, which is 846 at the moment. So lots of pupils in our school. We have also got increasing free school meal numbers. We're currently on 17.5%, which is again the highest we've seen, with our year rates in particular on 20%. Now, I just wanted to note that in Pontarddulais itself, there is a deprived area and there is a fly-in start facility in the local primary school, which sort of, reflects on how deprived really the area is to have the fly-in start facility. So I just wanted to summarise really where we are as a school. And my role as assistant head teacher, I am the safeguarding child protection officer, and my core responsibility is making sure it is pupils and their well-being is paramount. So I oversee our team around the child department, which involves our progress managers, our heads of year in each year group, our pastoral support assistants, attendance officers, we've got the school nurse and lots of outside agencies that support us and behaviour in the school. For example, our behaviour support teacher that comes in. But we've also got, which I will focus in more detail, our T-Dusky provision, which is the heart of where we are focusing on preventing IOTUS referrals. So that again is just an overview for you. So IOTUS prevention, so how do we use our delegated spend? Well, currently we've spent £51,941.96 in the last financial year, and the majority of this money actually goes on teaching, its staff resources, to make sure that we are supporting our pupils in school to prevent them from either permanent exclusion or referring on to education other than at school. And I have to say that our referrals have been minimal. We have had some referrals to, for example, it used to be the Step Ahead provision. I think it's called T-Glass at the moment in the new building in Cocket. And that is for more anxiety-related issues that we're seeing more and more with our pupils. But in terms of the actual behaviour, the new My Stay Rule provision, we've only actually referred one pupil, and that has been over the last 3 years. So I do feel that's a real reflection of how successful our strategy has been. And as I mentioned, our T-Dusky provision. So what is T-Dusky? So we had a caretaker's building on site a few years ago, and as that wasn't being used, we felt this would be an excellent provision to provide more intense support for pupils that really struggle to manage their behaviour in a mainstream setting. So the building currently houses 7 pupils that access this provision. Some are there more time than others dip in, but the provision has got classrooms downstairs. We've got a kitchen where pupils can cook, all computers. It's been set up. It's an exceptional facility, and I have to say, since it was set up in 2019, the pupils have looked after the facility. It's immaculate when you walk in there, and it just sets the standard really of the behaviour that we expect. So our provision money goes towards funding for the teachers in that facility. We've got 3 teaching assistants that work there full time, and we've also got a T-Dusky coordinator who has strong links then with all the parents and oversees the provision. So that's just a little insight into what it looks like. And then upstairs, we've got, again, classrooms and office space. We've got something called a Thrive room. And Thrive is a strategy that we've been using as well out of the budget, where staff have been trained. So our lead practitioner, who is the T-Dusky coordinator, has been trained in the Thrive approach. Now, the Thrive approach involves looking at how pupils develop their emotional and social skills, and where perhaps they've had a gap in that development for different reasons. It could be that parents, for example, have been drug users, or there's been a bereavement, and somewhere in their development there's been a gap, and we need to help them with strategies to manage their own behaviour. So that's what the Thrive room looks like, and they're able to provide the support in that designated room. And now TDusky provision, so the opportunity for pupils to have much more one-to-one time, receive additional literacy support and numeracy support, engage in various provisions. So they might use TDusky as a base, but then they may access other provisions such as the military, that we use our MPCT. We've used a provision called Bulldogs Boxing, which has been very successful. We've used college provisions, work placement schemes. But what we have found is that TDusky has massively reduced our exclusions, prevented our IOTUS referrals, and it's increased our pupil confidence around the school. For example, we've had one pupil in Key Stage 3 who was at risk of permanent exclusion or IOTUS referral, and now at the end of year 11, he's come out with a good set of qualifications, the MPCT, for example, but also his maths and English, which we never thought that he would get, and he has lasted in a mainstream school, and he's left us with that next ticket for his journey in his life. So that's just an example. And just to say about Bulldogs Boxing, we were fortunate to meet royalty in the Bulldogs. It was in February 2020, just before the pandemic, and the Bulldogs was the facility, like I said, the children in TDusky went to every Thursday. It involved a qualification. They were doing theory work, but also the practical, and they were absolutely delighted. It's once in a lifetime chance for anyone, but especially these types of pupils that don't get opportunities like this to meet royalty, and they were absolutely thrilled with that experience. Transform days as well. So not only TDusky, we look at pupils that are at risk from IOTUS referrals, very young, and there's just some examples here of some boys in Key Stage 3, and we use some money to make sure that we provide enrichment activities for these pupils. For example, some of these pupils have never been to a beach, they've never helped with gardening, and it's all life experience that, you know, improves their behaviour around the school. And this is just this week. We felt it was the last week of term. We used some of our resources to be able to man it with TA staff, and they've had an excellent time collecting so much rubbish, improving the school environment, cleaning the school minibus. So it may seem like minor sort of activities, but actually putting the resources into this has made a huge difference for those pupils. So going through, how has the pandemic affected us? Well, it has really affected our outdoor visits, which have provided such a great experience for our pupils. But obviously with risk assessments, that's something that has hindered us this term. And also our external providers as well, not being able to send our pupils on to certain provisions. And I will note that we have seen a rise in fixed term exclusions. We had 9 the last half term, which is a massive increase for us as a school. However, you know, the pupils been off for such a long time, being at home, not having the rules that they have in school perhaps, and we've had to re-establish those boundaries and rules with our pupils, and those, you know, at risk of IOTUS referrals. But what I will say is over this half term, after we put in the fixed term exclusions, we've seen a remarkable improvement now in behaviour around the school. We've had our sports day today, for example, and it's been excellent. We haven't had any exclusions, and it generally now setting those boundaries and re-establishing our rules with pupils have paid off very well. But what I would say is remarkably the children have adapted to the pandemic, and we are hoping now that we can, you know, as restrictions ease, we will be able to see more outdoor visits, use more of our external providers that we've used in the past, because it does, as I say, make a huge difference. Just something that we have been able to use, it has come at quite a cost, I think it's £150 a day, but we've invested in this, and it's the Baxter project. I've just noted a little clip here that was on Wales Online, and it's all through therapy dogs and making a difference to children's lives. Coming into school, the children get a chance to work with the therapy dog and the worker. We've been lucky to have Yasmin and a little dog called Frank. And they've been able to work with us this half term with pupils at risk of exclusion and IOTUS referrals, and also pupils, for example, that are selective mutes. And the work they've done has been remarkable in a short space of time. So I just wanted to use that as a quick example. That was just a little tweet there, and they used TDusky as a base. So we feel that reintegrating pupils back from IOTUS is important as well. So where we've had pupils that have had time in IOTUS provisions, we make sure that we have a good transition with the people that have worked with them, their key workers, before they start back with us. So we don't just throw them back into mainstream school, but we use a hybrid approach. So maybe when they come back to us, they are on a part-time timetable along with their current IOTUS provision. Bespoke timetables, maybe a mixture of the TDusky provision and mainstream, and making sure they have a designated key member of staff when they return to us. And then there will be more success in making sure they're reintegrated into mainstream.
Rachel, can I just come in there a second? I can see there's
Yes,
a hand up from Cyril Anderson.
Yes.
Is it a question?
Yeah, it is a question. Thanks for letting me come in. But I was willing to wait until the end. Just with the referrals, you did go say something about it, but is this really down to not so much the school, but the COVID problem? You know, they've been away from school and they haven't been able to mix properly. Could you just enlighten me on that, please?
Yeah, sorry, was that with the IOTUS referrals then?
Yes.
The referrals. So even pre-COVID, we had, you know, we had TDusky in place, and we've had a lot of this support in place, and it had dramatically reduced our IOTUS referrals. We had the one referral, like I said, this term. The pupil that we did refer, I don't believe there is a link with COVID, because that pupil had so many issues that we tried to help him with, but unfortunately sometimes the issues are outside of school, and as much support as we put in, there is still that risk of them you know, with their behaviours. So I don't think there was so much of a link there with the IOTUS referrals, but definitely a link we've seen with our exclusions. So the COVID, we think, played a part in when the children came back to school, seeing the exclusions. Instances, for example, not in class as such, but break times, lunch times, use of foul language, we saw an increase in that. And now, since we've used our exclusions, because as a school we don't like excluding, that's the last resort for us. We try and use lots of strategies first, but we do have bottom lines, we do have to set the standards, and since putting those exclusions in, like I say, we've seen a remarkable difference, and I think it was almost reprogramming the pupils a little bit to behave as we expect them to behave in school. So I hope that's answered your question. Gareth, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I would just reinforce those points that what I was surprised as a head teacher was that the behaviour of pupils on return to school in class was as good as it had been previously. The problems we encountered was during unstructured times, break times, lunch times, school journey home on the buses, and I think possibly pupils had forgotten how to socialise. They're so used perhaps to looking at their phones and communicating through their phones via social media. We have a ban on mobile phones in school. Pupils have to put them off and in their bags at the start of the day, and they switch them back on at the end of the day. And there were a few issues around pupils getting back into understanding the importance of that. But as Rachel just said, since half term, we haven't had any exclusions. And I think it proves the point that there is a place for exclusions, and I think they have helped get the school back to where we want it to be. And the pupils have responded incredibly well. And yeah, we've a day to go, and I hope that doesn't change on the last day. As Rachel said, we've had a sports day games day today, and it was fantastic to see pupils outside enjoying the weather, playing rounders, football, enjoying, relating well to each other, eating their packed lunches under the shade of a tree out in our expansive grounds, and it's wonderful to see.
Shall I hand over to you now, Gareth, for the last bit of the presentation?
Please do, thanks. Yeah. So the question here is, in your opinion, could this be improved? Now, during this morning's SCASH meeting, so that's where all the secondary head teachers in Swansea, and Helen was in that meeting as well this morning from Bishop Gore, and Dave Bowden, who works for the authority, explained there's a year's left on the kind of funding. We're unsure what's going to happen to the funding after that. And as one, I think I asked the members of SCASH what their feelings were, and everyone felt this funding is so important for the children of Swansea to continue, for all the reasons that Rachel just spoken about. And the funding for it, something it's skewed towards the 14 to 16, but looking at the photos that we shared with you this evening, you can see we work very closely and intensely with pupils as soon as they come into the school, because if you leave it until they're in year 10, it's too late. We have to work with these children at a young age as is possible. So, and then, yeah, what we'd be looking to do as well is to train more staff in the Thrive approach. We found that's been beneficial and productive in managing to turn around the lives of some of our children. So, are there any questions on that?
Could we do the presentation from Bishop Gore, and we'll take the questions then together. Great, thank you very much for an excellent presentation, though. Thank you very much. Helen, would you like to do the presentation for Bishop Gore?
Yeah, I'll try and share my screen now. Possibly. Okay. Hopefully you can see that.
We can, thank you.
Fabulous. Okay, I'm going to just run through it. It's quite similar to Pontedilais. I'll just run through our context because ours is quite different. We have a very clear vision at Bishop Gore in that every child that comes through the school gates will receive the best possible opportunities and education to achieve their potential as possible. And that's very important for us because we are an inclusive 11 to 18 school and we are very diverse as well. We have in year 7 over 30 primary schools that feed into us and that brings its own challenges. We have a designated catchment area, but pupils opt in to attend the school. We have a city centre location, so in terms of diversity, we do cater for a complete range of pupils. We have many pupils who have been, who attend the school who have been part of a refugee resettlement scheme. We also serve some of the most deprived wards in Wales and some of the most affluent. So we are very, very diverse, and with that comes its own challenges. We've had to adopt a very flexible response to our behaviour needs as a result of that. So one of our key aspects of our provision is the idea about breaking down barriers and obviously reaching that potential that I mentioned. So in terms of the first question, which we were posed with, how are we using our delegated spend associated with the behaviour strategy to reduce exclusions and referrals, as Pontedilais mentioned, our approach is a graduated approach that really begins with pupils as they enter school in year 7. Because as Gareth mentioned, by the age of 14, if we are trying to prevent permanent exclusions and AOTIS applications and placements, then we need to start working as soon as those initial problems are identified. And we can see those within the first few months of pupils attending the school. So we start off with a nurture provision, then a wraparound support package called Pit Stop and Be High 5 in Key Stage 3. And then when pupils enter Key Stage 4, our transition to adult provisions are called MyPod and Elevate, and they provide different types of support and learning environments for the pupils to meet their needs and develop their ability to self-regulate. So the aims of our provision are quite extensive. We want to make sure that our pupils have positive learning experiences when they're in their provision, and that they can return to mainstream, and then when they leave school they can contribute to the wider society and wider community. We want to develop their lifelong learning skills, and particularly their creative skills, which lead on to the development of their thinking skills. Part of that as well, because of the problems that a lot of the young people have, we have a lot of issues around raising confidence and self-esteem so that they respect themselves as well as respecting others. So that's fundamental to the provisions that we put in place. The aim of all of our provisions is for reintegration into mainstream and not that movement to AOTIS. And we plan their provision around that approach. And then in our Elevate provision, we're obviously looking at the transition then into employment or further education or training post-16. So we work really holistically with all the partners that are involved, and it often involves parents, external agencies, and it can even involve things like the youth offending service to keep that young person in school with us. But we also then look at our teaching and learning strategies to keep them engaged in school and the curriculum that we offer, and then the support that we can provide to meet their emotional, developmental, social and spiritual needs as well. So our provision, Be High 5 and Pit Stop are the initial provisions that we provide for 11 to 14-year-olds, and then MyPod and Elevate are for pupils aged between 14 and 16 years of age. And as I said, the pupils, we tend to identify them quite early. That's why I've talked about that initial provision at Key Stage 3. And they're identified through multi-agency professional assessments and determination of needs. So we have a network meeting where we pull professionals together to identify needs so that we can then tailor-make the support for those pupils. A lot of the pupils who are in our provisions have, as you can see, the bottom set of bullet points there, have either a statement of special educational needs or on the inclusion list, have significant social, emotional and behavioural difficulties. They have developmental difficulties that can't be supported in our mainstream setting. They need structure or to learn to develop structure for their social life and life outside of school. They're working with external agencies or professionals, and we are planning to get them back out from an AOTIS provision if they happen to have been there. So our provision is quite comprehensive. So as I mentioned, we have Be High 5 at Key Stage 3, which is about literacy, numeracy skills and behaviour management, and it's a 6-week programme with reintegration back into mainstream. Pit Stop is a wraparound package that only a small minority of Key Stage 3 pupils have, because they have very challenging behaviour and they are struggling to access mainstream learning. And we try very hard to prevent pupils trying to get to that Pit Stop level by working with them in our Be High 5 package.
Helen, could I say your screen is sticking on the one slide?
Oh,
I don't know if you were meant to move them on.
yes, they're all moving on for me.
Yeah, they're not. We just got your first slide, actually.
Oh, okay.
But nevertheless, we've obviously been listening to what you've been saying, so you can,
Okay, what I'll do is I can send these through, but I'll just carry on if that's okay.
No, that's fine. And if you could send them on to us afterwards, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So then I was on to the Key Stage 4 package, which is a package called MyPod, where pupils continue with their core subjects and some of their option choices in a smaller environment, but they do a more bespoke curriculum. So they do some additional vocational courses in a smaller group setting, and they will access things like SWEET, which is Succeeding with Employment, Education and Training, and they do some of the Princess Trust qualifications. And then Elevate, which is a small minority of pupils. In year 10 and year 11, there would be possibly 10 pupils in year 10 and 10 in year 11 accessing Elevate, who find it very challenging to be in a normal mainstream pathway. And they would have previously possibly been referred to panel for support, and they will follow things like vocational colleges in partnership with Gower College or NPT. We also then have a behaviour support provision, which is where we work on a one-to-one with our behaviour support specialist. We have a MySpace provision, which is the Derbyshire Positive Support Programme, which again is a one-to-one provision. We also have our outreach worker programme, which is a home tutor provision. Again, we have Cynnydd, and I have to reiterate what Gareth said there about the Cynnydd Learning Coach and the work that they do, working alongside our B-5, our MyPod and Elevate provisions. And that is match funded ourselves by a Boost Learning Coach, who works to ensure that we have additional support so that those pupils are getting key qualifications at level 2 and level 2, including English and maths, to ensure that they can go on to post-16 education. And they particularly work around exam preparation and revision and post-16 planning. So in terms of costs and the impact, we received £62,000 of EOTIS funding, just slightly more than that. And just our Elevate provision, with the staffing that's included in there, comes to £85,548. So we subsidise that to the tune of £20,000. But it has had a huge impact. Since 2013, only 2 pupils that have been through the provision have not achieved the level 1, and everybody is left with a qualification. None of the pupils who have been through our Elevate provision have received a permanent exclusion in 2021 or the previous year. We've had a reduction in AOTIS placements since 2011-2012 from 42 to just 15. And we are having 100% pass rates in things like our vocational courses in SWEET and Achieve, which is the Princess Trust qualification. So the next question was, can you give us some examples of where this has benefited pupils in the school? So we've seen successful reintegration from AOTIS provision. We've seen reduced referrals. We've seen a reduction in permanent exclusions. And we've also seen a reduction in the number of days pupils lose in terms of education as a result of exclusion. Number of pupils have gone up, but the actual days they're out for has gone down. So they're in school more, which is good news. We have seen a reduction and prevention in our socially, emotionally, behavioural pupils becoming NEET, and we're seeing better reintegration from school refusers and those experiencing anxiety, because we have that ability to offer that very bespoke provision and the tailored curriculum. We've, as I said, had excellent results, and I'll show you some of those. Oh, you won't be able to see them now, I've just realised, because you can't see my slides. But we've had excellent results. So, for example, those pupils leaving our Elevate provision in 2017, no pupils left our Elevate provision with the level 2, including English and Maths. By 2020, rather, that had gone up to 14.3%. Their CAPT 9 score, which is a key indicator, has risen from 208 in 2017 to 308 in 2020. And those figures are replicated across our MyPod provision, which again is Key Stage 4. So the pupils are going out and being very successful from our provision, which we are really, really pleased with. So if I go on to the next question, which is, how has the disruption to education caused by the pandemic affected your work in this area? We have seen an impact on pupils' mental health, and we are dealing with more issues within that area. And some of the pupils have experienced trauma over the period. We've had more Operation Encompass contacts regarding domestic violence and abuse, and that obviously has impacted on them. We've also had some of our vulnerable pupils experiencing crisis because of bereavement and financial worries within the family, because some parents and carers have lost their jobs. We've seen a lack of routines with some of the pupils, and that has resulted in a lack of tolerance. And I would reiterate what Gareth said there. In class, pupils are very calm, very compliant, but it's when they are out in unstructured time and unstructured spaces where that ability to self-regulate and show tolerance to others has been lacking in some occasions. We've also seen that the gap between those pupils who engaged well with blended learning and those who didn't has been exaggerated, and work is ongoing, obviously, with this kind of bespoke package to fill that gap. And when we were doing the Centre Determined Grades process, our Cynnydd learning coach and our Boost learning coach were able to ensure that they had assessments in place to support those young people who were struggling to re-engage. So their curriculum was reduced, and they've come out and been successful in achieving the level 1 and the level 2 qualification there. We are still working to get some persistent absentees back into school, and we are hampered by some of the elements within the Welsh Government guidance, because we have a family engagement officer who would go out to pick up children from home who are struggling to get out of bed and get them in. But the current guidance doesn't allow us to do that. However, it does allow them to travel in a taxi, but we're not allowed to do that at the moment. So what we are looking for is encouragement around the recent announcement by the Minister for Education regarding the escalation and de-escalation framework, to allow us to employ some of those strategies that we know work well with these pupils, which we currently are struggling to be able to do. And also, as Gareth said, to be able to access the provision which has been taken away from them in some instances because they've only just been allowed again to undertake visits. But as we return to normal, we are seeing pupils responding well, and I would concur with Gareth. We've had 3 sports days in bubbles, one for year 7, one for year 8, one for year 9, and so on. And the pupils have responded brilliantly to that and been totally engaged. So I'm on to the next question. How well is it helping you to reintegrate pupils back into the mainstream after being AOTUS? I would say it's fundamental. The package, particularly at Key Stage 3, works very effectively. By Key Stage 4, it is more challenging because the issues are often more complex due to mental health issues, some pupils becoming lax, and substance misuse. So it does help, but it does become more challenging as they get older. Next question was, how do you feel the overall behaviour strategy is working to the benefit of pupils currently? I think without it, we would have a significant number of pupils that we would have not engaged with or been able to support. This gives us a flexibility to meet their needs given the changing situation we face. And I think that's really important. Without this, there would be a significant number needing to access AOTIS provision. And the last question was, in your opinion, could this be improved? What I feel very strongly about is that our provision, we need to continually be upskilling our staff to have the skills to be able to respond flexibly to the ever-changing situation we're facing in society. So, for example, we're seeing an increased demand for support around mental health. So providing training for our staff in CBT, for example, cognitive behavioural therapies to help support would help. And then we would be able to morph our provision to meet the needs of the young people. So I think that's important, along with the issues around things like, county lines and contextualised safeguarding. We need lots of training around that to be able to respond swiftly. I also think that initiatives such as CUNID and the money running out on September the 2022 for that, I think that is important that we access going forward the Social Prosperity Fund to be able to continue with that kind of provision in schools. And I also think that we need to consider a graduated response. As I've mentioned, the money that we get for AOTIS only covers Key Stage 4, but we already do a lot of work at Key Stage 3 to try and support young people so that they don't get into that provision when they're in Key Stage 4. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Not that you really saw anything. You could have seen me. It might have been better.
No, great. Thank you very much indeed, though. Great presentation. Are there any questions that from anyone at all? Anyone putting their hands up? No, by the look of it. Could I? Oh, there are, and I've got one as well. Could I come in where there's Helen Morgan-Rees first, then Mike Day?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's not my position to ask questions in today's panel, but I would certainly like to offer my sincere gratitude for head teacher colleagues for coming here today at the end of a very busy academic year. Very grateful to Helen and to Gareth, and also to Rachel for their attendance here today. Very much appreciated, and thank you for showing us all the good work you're doing in your school. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Day.
And if I can ditto that, yeah, thanks very much. And also, thank you on behalf of the pupils that you're responding to and working with, because I think that's the key, is the difference it makes. And it's been impressive to hear how the initiatives that you've introduced have been able to produce those positive benefits. I suppose the question that I would have is each individual school has their own challenges and perhaps their own different approaches. You mentioned earlier on about meeting with SCASH this morning. Do you have the opportunity within SCASH to share good practice on this particular issue? Is there any example of perhaps one school learning from the experience that you've had to be able to implement something that you've done in your school effectively in their own school?
Do you want me to answer that, Gareth? Yeah, we have, as part of SCASH, we have a head teachers development programme that Jan from Pontedilla started and Rob Phillips from Dylan Thomas has taken over. And as part of that, head teachers are asked to present on different aspects. So we share some of our best practice, at those events, and they take place every term or twice a year. But we also have regular SCASH meetings. I think they're monthly, Gareth, aren't they, really? And we always have a head teacher's issues section where we will discuss problems, for example, where we see an increase possibly in exclusions going on, and we will share strategies for dealing with that. So, for example, we were having a conversation, and Helen Morgan-Rees facilitated that conversation in one of the head teachers, the secondary head teachers meeting we had regarding exclusions, and a lot of the heads shared the strategies that they were using to deal with that. And one of the things that we were talking about was developing and supporting assemblies in a PSE package to tackle the lack of tolerance that we're now seeing, because the pupils have been out of school and been quite isolated within their communities and not exposed to other groups, and how they go about developing those skills again, and reinstating all those values that we know they have and we've seen before, but it's getting those back in place.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Could I just
Councillor
jump in as
Robert
well?
Smith. Oh, sorry, go on, Gareth. Do you want to?
Yeah, I concur with everything Helen just said. There's the formal and informal part of the networks in Swansea. It's a very healthy situation in terms of collaboration, not just within the remit of behaviour, but all aspects of school life. And as well as SCASH, we have a senior leaders network where deputy head teachers meet and they share best practice. They met yesterday afternoon after school, for example. And I'm just thinking of some examples that we've picked up off other schools via SCASH and the Senior Leaders Network. Vocational courses, we've learned from other schools which vocational courses are successful. The Military Preparation College, I think, or Motivational College is now called, which is located near the Liberty Stadium, and many more examples beside. And I think we're fortunate to be working in an authority where other head teachers and deputy head teachers are able to share those with colleagues. So yes, to answer your question, it is used in that way, SCASH, not just obviously with behaviour, but wider than that as well.
Great,
thank you.
Very successful.
Thanks very much. Councillor Robert Smith.
Yeah, I think you answered one of the questions I had, to be honest, when you answered about the networks that exist, and it's good to see the good practice that exists within our schools in Swansea. And I think moving forward, it's a matter of building on this good practice and sharing the practice, continuing to make sure that that practice is disseminated across all schools, and helping each other to work out new strategies and different strategies as these issues evolve. So congratulations to both schools for the excellent presentation this afternoon, and look forward to working with you as well going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. Any other questions? Well, could I say, really great presentations from both schools. I was, it's quite exciting to see what is actually going on. And I think when you talked about T Dusky in Pontedillas and how the pupils are taking ownership of it, and they would, and that's good news, and that's responsibly, and the work that Bishop Gore were doing in some of the most deprived and affluent areas, and trying to bring all that together is no mean task. So thanks very much. I was pleased to hear about the shared, you're sharing your knowledge, because I think good practice can be shared. Every school is going to be bespoke, and I think it's good that in Swansea you've got that opportunity to have that bespoke a system for each school. But nevertheless, everybody can learn something from someone else. And I just wondered, is this available on an online platform as well? Possibly. That's really down over to Helen, really, as a thought.
Yeah, I think in terms of the systematic dissemination of good practice, we do have several repositories or several platforms, not just in Swansea, but across Wales. So at a local level, we do keep a repository with our Central School Improvement Advisors. So they try and collect good examples and keep them so that they can use their professional expertise then to share that good practice with schools that need that type of support. We've also got on a regional level different ways of collecting and disseminating good practice through the ERU methods. We've also got good practice that can be gleaned out of the Estin website as well. So there are different ways of collecting and systematically disseminating that good practice. So I think it's important that we continue to do that formally so that we can be systematic in our approach and not just do so in informal ways, but very often the informal ways of sharing practice are the best ones, I've got to say.
Very often, yeah. Gareth, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just make an additional point. Something I should have mentioned and was brought up in SCASH this morning is that we run a subject network meetings on a termly basis in Swansea, but that's also extended to well-being. So, for example, our head of music will host the subject network here in school, not physically at the moment, but virtually. And I think it's Morriston who hosts the well-being. So what you'd have there are the senior leaders who have the overview on behaviour and well-being, care support and guidance in the separate schools, meeting on, I think it's a termly basis. And as Helen's just said, yeah, you have that formal structure to it, but the byproduct of that then is that you've got the informal. So Rachel, for example, now she'd pick up the phone and know who to contact in another school in Swansea, or how do you deal with this, and any advice you could give us on this, and vice versa. So I think that's, and Dave Bowden, who was in SCASH this morning, the county officer, came in and he spoke about how that's going to continue into next year, and we're glad to hear that. Just a question, sorry, after this item draws to a close, is there an expectation that myself, Rachel and Helen stay within the meeting?
Not at all. It's entirely up to you. You're very welcome, but you've had a busy, not only a busy year, but a busy day as well. So please feel free to go.
Okay, thank you.
Because I'm sure you've got lots of things to do before the end of term. Could I say, are there any other questions? No. And if I could thank the three of you, actually, really great presentations, and thank you for everything you're doing for the most vulnerable children almost that we have. So thank you very much indeed, and thanks for coming along this afternoon and giving of your time.
Thanks very much. Bye
Thank
now.
you.
Bye.
It's a pleasure.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that was very interesting, actually, and it's always good to hear about the good practice and everything is being shared. But as we said, every school is bespoke, isn't it? Really, because all the pupils are different from different areas and so on. Obviously, you can collect strands together that will help one another. But it was very interesting to hear, and how some of them, they were doing different things but getting good results as well. So that was interesting. And I hope you all thought so. The next item on the agenda is a bit of a verbal update on where we are with the ERU Scrutiny meeting that I attended along with Councillor Peter Black on the 28th of June. And also I think it's moving very quickly. So the 28th of June was only a few weeks ago, but I'm sure a lot of stuff, looking at Councillor Robert Smith and Helen Morgan-Rees, has moved on since that time. But ERU, for those who aren't aware, will finish at the end of August, and there's a new group, a new partnership. It's called the South West Wales Education Partnership. A very snappy title, I thought, but coming from involving Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire and Swansea. at the last meeting of the scrutiny body, obviously we learned, obviously we knew that Eru was finishing at the end of the month. The new consortia, because Neath Port Talbot left, then Ceredigion, and Powys don't want to join the new consortia, so we're left with Swansea, Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire, which is obviously a much smaller footprint. We were told that the costs to run that are down to now £2 million, so there is a reduction in costs, but they will nevertheless have 20 staff, and they were saying that that was agile working, or we felt, and I think I quote Councillor Peter Black, that there seems to be a lot of structure, and it seems to be quite elaborate, and I, as I said, not too agile in actual fact. So there was real concerns around that, and also we did ask the question about the rules of engagement, because if you're going into a cricket match, you know the rules before you actually go in. But when we asked, was there going to be a majority view or a veto, there was no decision on that at that point. And obviously that was going to be looked at. Well, that needs to be done before we actually obviously go in reality. But obviously work will be taking place, I'm sure, on that. And then we did ask the question about Neath Port Talbot, Ceredigion and Powys. How would they operate outside the consortia, the new consortia? And we were told that they would buy services in. So if, so I asked that they would buy services in, and they would like to buy them in, it would appear, from our new consortia, or alternatively from one of the other three. If so I did ask the question, if Swansea, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire would like to go it alone, and not spend the £2 million between them by joining, would they be able to buy services from the other three consortia, and would it be cheaper? But we were quite shocked to find out that no on this model had not actually been worked out. So we could have found that that could have been a cheaper model, but that hadn't actually been worked out. So that was a bit of a worry. So I also asked, and followed by a number of others, who is going to fund the setting up of the new structure, because it's not going to come cheap. Obviously, and again, we couldn't get an answer to that, because if it is out of current spending, there's only so much money. So it would mean, if it's being spent on setting up a new structure, that is less money for frontline education. So that was a real worry as well. And of course, the managing director, Gareth Morgan's, also said he was concerned that the new partnership may have to cover the cost of the old structure until from September to December, a view that we were not too happy about, because if in reality all 6 of the original council should actually fund that and not be left to the 3. So those I think are the main sort of points I would like to raise. There is a DVD of the proceedings. If you go into our website and go into Eru and the regional consortia, you can see the full DVD of the proceedings there, and the points that I raised there and the replies that we got are all on that. So you can sort of pick up on that, and you can see where my concerns were, Peter's concerns were, and from Swansea, and concerns from the other local authorities. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts, but of course, Helen and Robert it's moved on, as I say. That was the 28th of June, and very often things have moved on since then, and some of those worries you probably may be able to alleviate. First hand up, Councillor Mike Day.
I would suggest, if you don't mind, Chair, to ask Helen to come in, and I'll ask my question after that.
Yeah, no, sure. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. You're quite correct in pointing out that things have moved on since the 28th of May, and both the elected member for education and myself have watched the proceedings, as you alluded to, on the YouTube channel. So essentially, some of the concerns that you have been discussed not in a public meeting, but in the new Shadow Joint Committee for the South West Wales Education Partnership. And in that Joint Shadow Committee, which was a closed meeting, we did discuss that there is work to be done in terms of the winding down of the current consortium that is ERO. I think in terms of a point of accuracy, I would like to point out that it's fair to note that Powys didn't want to leave ERO. I think that's what they said in that meeting. They were very keen that they didn't want to leave ERO. It's not that they didn't want to enter into a new regional partnership, which is what South West Education Partnership will be. So we have agreed in principle, and it's been announced publicly in a statement to our head teacher colleagues yesterday, that the services of the services of SWEP, or the South West Wales Education Partnership, would be available to other authorities. So that was determined in the closed meeting. The closed meeting as well also addressed the issue of the need for us to take to every council the new legal agreement for the partnership, and that would happen during the autumn term. So we recognise that things will not be wound down perfectly by the 31st of August, and the new partnership will not be in perfect existence by the next day. We recognise that a period of transition will be required to get us to that position, and the new legal agreement will take us there. But before we depart from the current legal agreement of ERO, which has been in existence since 2014, we need to understand the contingent liabilities of the exiting parties. And the current legal agreement clearly states that an exiting authority has 100% liability within the first year, and also 100% liability in the second year, and there is a sliding scale then thereafter. So understanding the complete liabilities of exiting parties is a clear undertaking that must be achieved. To achieve that undertaking, obviously the new staff structure will determine really what the costs are for the exiting parties. So a lot of the staff structure considerations are not in the public domain, because there needs to be a period of consultation with staff themselves. And of course, there will be a risk of redundancy. On the nature of the structure itself, I would like to say that there has been a proportionate scaling down of staff in comparison to the size of the new partnership. So it does see us with at least a 40% reduction of staff compared to the old ERO structure. So that is commensurate really with the three partners working together with a far more reduced staff. I do apologise. My dog has got something to say on the matter as well.
No apologies. Yeah, I'm sure he's got a great contribution to make.
So I will continue just to say that governance was a matter that was of great importance to the joint scrutiny on the 28th of May. And the governance arrangements will appear in the new legal agreement, which is currently in draft. And the new legal agreement has certain schedules within the agreement that need to be finalised, but it has matured into a decent draft for the new partnership, and the governance, including some of the asks really from that joint scrutiny group, the joint council scrutiny group, have been considered and wound already into that draft. So I think that there is work to be done to finalise the winding down and take the new legal agreement to each constituent council. So that will happen in the autumn term. So we do very much see this as a period of transition and not a red letter day for the new partnership on the 1st of September. We'll need a little bit more time to finalise things and get to the position that we're all comfortable with. I hope that gives you some assurance that matters have moved on.
Thank you, Helen. I'm sure they were going to have moved on, because with the nature of it, you know, that was a snapshot on the 28th of June, and obviously things do move on. Councillor Mike Day, then Councillor Robert Smith.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the update. Thank you, Lyndon, yeah, for feeding into this. And a couple of comments first, and then a question. The comment relates to the fact that clearly we're in, as Helen mentioned, a transition period, and it's important for us to recognise that there are going to be, smoothing out of various bumps in the road, shall we call it like that. But I think we all want to see that this particular body will be having an impact and positive outcomes on the performance and standards within our schools, and more importantly for our pupils. So, I think that that's something that I would like us to come back to at some point, is what the performance measures are going to be to determine the success or otherwise of this particular partnership. And I think the other issue then relates to the idea that we have the governance structures being discussed and negotiated. And I wanted to ask how the outcomes or the discussions at the Scrutiny committee will be fed into our council as a constituent member. Will it come through you again, Lyndon, as the representative on that particular body? Or will there be a mechanism for it being reported to the Scrutiny Programme Committee? Because I note that on our 1st of September meeting, we've got an update on joint scrutiny or the regional scrutiny coming forward. So if I don't necessarily need an answer now, but it would be useful to know what the reporting mechanisms will be, because I guess that with the joint committee, for example, Robert will be reporting those outcomes into the cabinet structures in any event. But it would be useful then for us to have an idea of, as far as the scrutiny side of things are concerned, how that mechanism is going to work. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. I would think it could be via in our case, the Scrutiny Programme Committee. But we'll get back to you with that, if I may. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Robert Smith.
Yeah, I think Helen has covered quite a bit of the ground, because things have moved on since the 28th of June. I think, there are a number of key principles here. It's a protracted process, both to wind up the existing partnership and to establish the new arrangements. But I think, the principle's got to be that this offers value for money, that it adds to provision that individual authorities are making, that we're doing, but that this adds value in everything it does. And I think the structure of the new organisation and its focus needs to be on that. This has got to prove its worth for us and for the other partners involved. There's some specific comments around the management and veto, and also how other authorities would be able to buy services in. I think some of it is a matter for them, but I think we need to be clear that we will not be offering services to other authorities to the detriment of our own needs and the other partners that are contributing to this. So some kind of cost recovery model it would look to me as the way forward there. But I think that the exact model needs to be worked out and agreed. So it is still a work in progress. But there are some key principles that we working to and that we won't be departing from.
Great, thank you very much. Helen, do you want to come back in, or is it?
Yeah, just in response to Councillor Day, just to say, obviously the new partnership will have a specific business plan, and that business plan will provide the key strategic priorities for the partnership, the regional partnership. And there will be a lead officer appointed to the new partnership, so that post will be advertised eventually. So I guess it would be good at some point for that lead officer to be invited to the Joint Scrutiny Councillors Committee, and possibly again to this scrutiny panel. What's really important really is that the business or delivery plan really is understood in terms of the functions of the new partnership. and those functions are very much different to what our school improvement staff currently offer in Swansea. So it's holding really the partnership to account in respect of their business plan that will be key going forward. And then the bit around governance, and currently the joint scrutiny councillors group is an informal group, whereas the joint committee is very much a formal committee. So the scaling down of that joint committee of councillors, currently it's a group and it's informal. So we see that being scaled down and operating with similar terms of reference as it does now. There have been a couple of asks from that group really to consider in terms of governance. For example, that observer status from that group is offered to somebody going to the joint committee. So the chair of that particular councillors group would be available or allowed to go as an observer, a non-voting observer, to the joint committee. So there's a flow really in terms of governance, and you're right in pointing out then the joint committee would be able to report to Cabinet if required.
Great, thank you. Those, in fact, that point we did make to Councillor Dole actually when we sent the letter off. And we await his reply. Good. Well, thank you very much, Helen. Any other questions from anyone? But thank you very much. And I did say when I started that, gosh, the 28th of June wasn't that long ago, but I bet you've done quite a bit of work in the meantime, and you have. Only thing I would say, it's been a very unsettling time for the staff at Eru, and many of them we know because they've been to committees in Swansea Council to speak to us and so on. And you know, I obviously wish them all the very best because they you know, been doing a good job under difficult circumstances in some cases, and especially when you get that uncertainty in the background. So I'd like to thank them, and you know, with all this reorganization in many doesn't reflect the things that they have done. In fact, they've obviously done their very best for everyone. So thank you all very much indeed. And the final item on the agenda is the future work programme. I don't know if anybody's got any comments. No? Okay. Well, finally then, before I thank you all for turning up today, can I thank the teachers and the staff throughout Swansea? Can I tell you, they've had a year like no other. And I hope they're going to have a few weeks off in the summer where they can take a bit of a break, because I think they need it, because they had a learning curve. They didn't have any choice about it. They were learning on the hoof, as everybody was, and they've done a tremendous job. So I just hope they can get a bit of spare time and a bit of a rest over the summer, because I know that the autumn is, the autumn term now, and they go back in September is going to be very busy. And that also goes to you, Helen, and your staff at the centre as well. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks.
See you soon.